I have committed 20 years to corporate America. And when I went to Johnson& and Johnson, I started my transitional process of transitioning. We at that time, my former wife and I owned the number one hair salon in Houston. So in 1983, we made our first $1 million.
Three things you will learn from this episode. Number one, how Mr. Mathew Knowles became a top executive at Xerox and what corporate life taught him about leadership. Number two, why he walked away from a high-powered career to build Destiny's Child from the ground up. And number three, the real story behind managing Beyoncé and the balancing act between being a father and a boss. Welcome to this episode of the Heartbeat for Hire podcast. I feature Olympians, CEOs, disruptors, authors, professional athletes, and the best of the best, where they share their stories of resilience with my lens on leadership and culture. Let's get started. What do you get when you combine a top-performing Xerox executive, a visionary music mogul, and a father willing to bet it all on his daughter's dream? You get Mr. Mathew Knowles, a force of strategy, resilience, and reinvention. In this two-part series, we're going to sit down with the man behind the rise of Destiny's Child and the father of global icon Beyoncé to unpack the business decisions, leadership principles, and unapologetic boldness that took a dream from Houston, Texas to the world stage. Mr. Knowles, welcome to the show.
Good morning, good afternoon,
Hello.
wherever you are in Boston.
It is such a treat to have you here. Thank you so much for sharing time with us. I want to start the show the way I always start the show, and you have an incredible story. As I said, this is going to be a two-parter, but could you share at least the first part of your story, and we'll do the second part of your story next week.
Oh, that would be great. That we can really take our time and have a
Yes,
conversation.
perfect. Go for it.
So, when you talk about the first part of my story, do you want me to start at corporate America, or would you
Yes,
rather I
please.
start?
That would be
So,
great.
I finished college in Nashville, Tennessee in 1974. And I wasn't prepared for the day after college, and I share that with young people about preparation for that day after college. Often you want to focus on getting the degree,
Oh
but you
yeah.
don't focus on what am I going to do?
Now what?
Yeah, so I was that person, and I ended up working with Metropolitan Life Insurance Company, which typically when you don't have a real job, that's what you go to, right? Because they know you're going to sell your family, and then you're going to run out of people, and then you'll move to the next thing. But then I finally landed with AT&T in Nashville, Tennessee, as a communication consultant. Uh, Fraternity Brothers came out to Houston in 76, October of 1976. And we just fell in love with Houston. But back then, the Bell system and AT&T, they didn't like each other. So you couldn't
Right.
transfer. You couldn't transfer. So I ended up coming out to Houston with no job. Ended up working with Pitney Bowles uh, for a brief period, not because I was moving around. I was always in sales and marketing. I always, as a child, wanted to be a businessman and didn't know what the hell that meant, but I wanted always to be a businessman. So here I am in Houston, me and some of my friends on a Friday doing happy hour, we used to call it. And we're just guys talking. And this little short white guy walks up to me and he says, "Can I talk to you for a minute?" I'm like, "What does this guy want to talk about?" He says, "I've been listening to you and your friends for about an hour. You are exactly what we want at Xerox. You're a leader. I understand your thought process. Can you meet me Monday morning at 8 o'clock in this building?" Because we're in the building where Xerox office. And I thought the guy was just giving me BS at first. I was like, who is this guy? And then he pulls out his business card. It says, Director, Human Human Services. I was like, wow. That's how I got my job at Xerox. Literally, you never know who's listening is
So
the
true.
message of that story. And so I went to Xerox Corporation all excited. And, you know, I quickly was positioned to move an upward mobility uh, uh, package that they have for some people. And so I started as a trainee for a year because there was no territories available because this branch was the number one branch in the country for
Mhm.
Xerox selling copiers. So I trained for a year. Then I moved to the engineering division selling a microfiche reader printer. And then back to the copiers. I got finally a territory downtown Houston. And one evening, the ticker tape machines, back then we had those ticker tape machines,
Mhm.
and that thing was, and I was there and nobody else, and I was supposed to be in that room, but I went in that room to see what it was, and it showed this grade 11, and I was like a grade 4. And so the salary was like 3 times more. And it had this word I couldn't pronounce, zero radiography.
Mm.
I was like, what that? And then I started looking and make a long story short, I ended up asking the branch manager, could I interview for it? And he laughed and he said, you've only been here for a year and a half. How how do you think you're going to go to the most elite division of Xerox? And I said, well, but it might be great experience. He's like, you're right, sure, I'll let you interview. What he didn't know is I spent a month because the library was the next block over on learning everything I could about breast cancer. And
Mm.
so when I interviewed, I knew where people had been there 15 years and they were talking about tenure and what they have accomplished. I actually talked about the modality.
So for the folks that don't know what you mean by this, you were basically going to be selling equipment that would detect breast cancer. That's what you were trying to go for. Yeah. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this is in 1980. Again, I had been at Xerox about a year and 10 months, something like that. And I got the job to everybody's surprise because that manager was impressed that I actually knew the modality and knew some things about breast cancer. And then I was fortunate to, for 8 years, work in the medical division of Xerox. Um, in 1980, I was on the podium and still on the podium talking about early detection for breast cancer. Happenstance would have it that it saved my life, that one day I trained on male breast cancer. We'll
Mhm.
fast forward to that at some other point.
Yeah, that'll be part two for sure.
But I got the position. I uh, became the number one sales rep in the world for 3 out of 4 years. I became, this branch manager, Worth Davis was his name. He took a liking to me. He saw my leadership and he wanted to position me again for upward mobility. So he would take me to these meetings and I would be, okay, I'd sit there, long table at Exxon or Shell, and it'd be these, and I have in my book, The DNA of Achievers. I said, here I'm sitting, I'm in my early 20s with these old white men talking about helping people in Houston. And I'm like, oh, that would be Knowles, go get some coffee. Knowles, make us some
Oh,
copies.
no.
And so, but I was young, right? I
Yeah.
was young. And so finally, they would ask me my opinion of something, and how I answered it, they liked it, and so they said, "Oh, come sit over here with
Mhm.
us, Lyndsay." Those were the CEOs and presidents of Shell, Exxon,
Amazing.
Texaco, and I was young and I didn't understand. Certainly today I do. What position Worth put me in to
Yeah.
understand from a micro level how leaders and presidents and CEOs think at
It's
a micro,
what an
macro.
amazing opportunity. I mean,
Yeah,
what a phenomenal ride and good on you. I mean, you did what I love to say to all my seller friends is if you don't ask, you'll never know. So,
yeah.
you asked to take that role. They took a chance on you. It obviously paid off. You demonstrated you knew your business. And that was a thriving role for how many years for you?
8 years, eight
Amazing.
years covering like 8 states in America. But again, just to sit there and see how they thought, their thought process at a macro, I said micro, I meant macro level,
Yeah.
was just, I learned a whole lot. And then I was put in a leadership position at Xerox. Uh, Back in the 80s, Xerox was noted for its leadership, sales, and marketing training.
Mm.
It was really IBM and Xerox. Those were the
Yes.
two best companies in the 80s to work with.
Which that's
Uh,
where I came from. I spent 23 years there at IBM.
why I didn't know that?
I
Then
did.
you know exactly what I'm talking
I
about,
do.
right?
And my father was there for 41 years. So the time that you were selling copiers, that's what he was doing. And he was selling typewriters too. So yes, I know this world well.
Wow, I did not know that. So while at Xerox, I was in a leadership position because Xerox also was noted uh, repeatedly by Forbes magazine as the number one place for Blacks to work for in America
Wow, I didn't know that.
because they had such a diversity program and they had, again, they had this upward mobility opportunity. So I became the president of an organization called Minorities United in the Southern
Mm.
Region, which was about 10 states of the Black employees. When I started at Xerox, it was about 1,400 Black employees. When I left Xerox, it was about 14,000 Black employees.
Wow, that's amazing.
So it allowed me to be president of that organization for 3 years and interface with the corporate part of Xerox. So ideas and challenges that were happening, that everybody was a win-win. So those are my Xerox years. They were great. I'll never forget them. Do you want me to keep going?
No, I want to pause for a second because I want to just mention that, that leadership experience that you got and those moments in the rooms with all the CEOs that had to prepare you for a lot of what was to come, whether you knew it or not. So you've had this glorious sales career. You got to lead some exceptional organizations and really make an impact on diversity, which I totally understand. And I participated in as well at IBM. IBM was a hugely diverse organization, and it was a wonderful place for me to grow up. That's what I thought all business looked like. I didn't know until much later that was not the case. But
We both found out.
yeah, yeah. So what? Fast forward a tiny bit, what was the moment? Obviously, you have these very talented daughters who are capable of incredible things. What was the moment that you said, "Okay, this career has been great. It's blessed me. I'm ready for a pivot, and I have a lot of faith in my family, and here we go. I'm going to move into the music world." Like, talk me through some of that.
Okay, so I'm gonna have to spend 2 or 3 minutes because I did 20 years in corporate
Right.
America and we're only at 10.
Oh, then let's keep going.
so, so the medical division of Xerox closed because I was the number one sales rep. The president moved to Philips Medical System and brought me with him.
Mm,
And at Philips, I only sold two products. We're talking 1988, first generation MRI units.
wow.
And the amazing technology of MRI, spinning protons and
Yes.
pre-testing, and it was and selling something now $4 million, $5 million. It was so exciting, the things I had to learn from a scientific point of view. So I sold CT and MRI scanners, and then did that for about 5, 6 years, and then ended my corporate career as a neurosurgical specialist with Johnson and Johnson in their Codman division. And then that's when the Destiny's
I
Child.
mean, that makes the jump even more incredible. Because I mean, to spend all that time in medical sales, which is what we'll call it, um, that is a really big switch to jump into music. So I'm dying to hear the thought in your mind of, yeah, let's make this a real thing. But I also want to know, how did you know that your daughters, plural, had enough talent to make it work? Because, there's a lot of parents with talented kids, but not everybody is going to become a Destiny's Child or a Beyonce or Solange.
Yeah.
So talk me through
And this
decisions.
music industry is not just about talent.
No, there's so
That's
much
just
business involved.
just a small part of it. I wouldn't say small, but that's half of
Yeah,
it. The other half has nothing to do with talent. It's about business acumen and
100%.
marketing and having great songs. But I made that transition. I have committed 20 years to corporate America, and when I went to Johnson and Johnson, I started my transitional process of transitioning. We at that time, my former wife and I owned the number one hair salon in Houston. So in 1983, we made our first $1 million. And it's interesting because I use a formula that I learned in the medical field that Caterpillar, our hair salon, and that the number one thing a woman dislikes about going to a hair salon is the amount of time they have to stay there.
It's
And so I knew if I could reduce that time in half, and that if I made a clear understanding of who my customer was and my target demographics, which were women, Black women specifically, who were professionals making $75,000 or more, if I could reduce their time of stay from 3 hours to an hour and a half,
hmm,
then I could double what I charged them. And I learned from the medical field, you first go, they fill out all this information, you go, and a nurse checks your temperature and
sure.
all of those vital signs. And back then, they would put on the door what those things were. And so when a doctor walked in the room, he or she already pretty much knew the diagnosis. And then they gave you a diagnosis, and then if you had an infection, they then gave you a prescription, and then you paid, and that was it. And we used that formula that the hairstylist never left the chair. We had assistants to shampoo and
Nice.
take you through the process. And we had a prescription pad, just like a doctor, that said, hey, these are the products you check out.
Hmm.
And 50% of our revenue was generated from products.
Smart.
So that part was happening when I was transitioning. I had the funds to have a little breathing room to
Of course.
transition. At that same time, actually, and I'm glad you asked me the story, Lyndsay, because the story is not told correctly. At that same time in Houston, there was a rapper that I signed to my management company. At that same time, Beyonce was 11, 12 years old, and uh, there was a knock came to our hair salon that these two managers were putting together a girls group, and they wanted Beyonce to be the lead singer, and they got them on Star Search.
I
And
remember that.
I would drop her off in practice and go play basketball until she finished and pick her up. I did what dads do. I wasn't
Sure.
even thinking about getting into music at her early years. And then they go to Star Search and they lose. And Ed McMahon, a lot of you might remember
Oh,
it.
I remember the show. I watched it.
And the kids are crying their heart out. They just competed against a 40-year-old rock band, which I was like, why? Why?
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Totally makes sense.
and he says, Mr. Knowles, I don't understand, but no, people that lose on this show, they go on to be successful. They go and they change the organization, they rededicate, they get inspired. He says it's the people that win, they get lazy and they don't go anywhere. And so that's what we did. We came back to Houston, and then I changed the lineup, partnered with one of the managers, and I went back to school
Yeah.
because I wanted, if I was going to be in this field, I wanted to know as much as I could and learn as much as I
Well, you
could.
answered my big question because as I was preparing for this and I was thinking about you, I was like, how how do you know how to navigate the music business? Because as you said, there's so much business, there's a lot of acumen, and it's a bit of a different landscape than selling med tech or, selling software or any corporate business experience. So thank you for answering that. So
But Lyndsay,
going,
to
yeah,
answer your question on how did I know, Beyonce and Solange years later, like in our house, it was music always. It was always, I love music. My
yeah,
former
yeah,
wife loved music. So it was always all types of jazz, R&B, all types of music being played. And I was on the school board where Beyonce was in elementary school. And one of the things that we wanted to do is start a, let the young kids get uh, begin to understand the music industry, and not industry, but music itself. And so we gave them the tools and bought them a nice sound system for the young kids. It's elementary school. And Beyonce became a part of that. And then they had a competition. It was a very first competition. And she would be upstairs rehearsing by herself. I wasn't involved with that. My mom was at the hair salon most of the time. And so here's her first competition against middle school, and she's in elementary school, and she's doing the song Imagine. And she says, Mom, Dad, this when am I going to go up on the stage so I can win my $100 and win my trophy? And we were like, how do you know you're going to win this? These are older kids.
yeah,
We wanted to prepare her.
yeah,
You might not win this.
right? You want to believe in her, but you also want to set some expectations. I know this drill with my
So she was like, oh, yeah, well, Mom, Dad, yeah, I'm going to win it. And so she goes up on the stage, and we look at each other like, is that our, is that our Beyonce? Because she totally changed her personality, which is why one of the albums we named Sasha Fierce,
yes,
because when she got on that stage and when she
transformed.
now gets on that stage, she becomes a totally different person.
Yeah,
Off the stage, she's quiet, kind of shy. On that stage, she's the Michael Jordan, the
yeah.
Kobe
Oh,
Bryant.
she is.
Yeah.
She is so impressive. And I mean, I've been enjoying her career since the beginning. And I do remember the Star Search that she was on and have certainly seen those clips. So I mean, it's got to be such a moment of pride. So she does this competition. Did she win?
She won.
Yes.
She won her $100 and she won her trophy, her
Amazing.
first trophy. And then she went on to do 32 competitions and win them all.
I love it. Okay, so 32 competitions. Now you know you have something.
Now I know I have something. And I always say this to parents, it was never our goal to say, this is what, or Solange, this is what you're going to do. As parents, our role was to see what they were attracted to,
Yeah.
where they're, and we exposed them to a lot of stuff. We took them to NASA, we took them to different kind of stuff, libraries, but it was music always and
Yeah.
dance. And so the philosophy when I hear parents, I want my kid to be this, it really, really saddens me because we never had those expectations. We wanted them to find their passion and then surround them with support.
I love that. And I think that's how I parent too. I think there's the parents that kind of take over and helicopter and okay, you're going to play hockey and it's rink time and this is where we're going to be and this is where we're going to live. Is that child going pro? Probably not. So I like that you gave the space for her to chart her own course and support her along the way. So she's won all these competitions. Now you know you've got some really raw talent to work with. Those people that were interested in the girl group, was that when that entered the scene? That or how did Destiny's Child get formed?
Yeah, well, remember when they lost on Star Search, then I became the co-manager,
Mm,
and that's when we made changes. We had at that time they had four
right.
singers, three dancers, trying to get a record deal with dancers and singers, which is unheard of.
Yeah.
It's like unheard of. And so we made those changes. It was one of the young ladies that was outgrowing the other singers, and it just didn't look right. Really talented, went on to work with Prince. But we made those changes, and then I assisted in getting a deal with Electro Records. So the girls went to Atlanta with a producer that worked with Babyface, and the producer was so busy with other acts, he just didn't have the time to focus in on them. And so Electro Records dropped Destiny's Child. They were called
Wow.
then the Dolls.
They're kicking themselves now.
Yeah, they called them the Dolls. But I now, as I am in the industry, I understand they had this group called In Vogue.
Right. I remember them. Love them.
And you learn that you don't want to go to a record label that has something just like you that's
No,
successful
that's right.
because they're going to put all of their focus on
That's right.
that. And so it was a learning process for me. And so the girls went to Atlanta, came back. I renamed them again to something fresh. I don't
Yes.
know where I came with that name. Photo shoots and start sending out packages in the studio, trying to get the sound right. Uh, Hit a brick wall with that. Uh, Created another name, Destiny. Uh, and, I always told the ladies, you never know who's going to be in the audience.
Right.
So we were at an event that they were opening for this group called SWV, and there were maybe 100 people there.
Yeah, I remember them.
And I said, you just never know. You give it like it's 10,000 people. And sure enough, in the audience, was someone from Columbia Records.
Amazing.
And that's how we eventually got signed to Columbia Records.
Wow. Wow. Okay. Pause right here. We're going to come back. I have one more question before we break for part two, but pause right here for just a moment and we'll be right back. If you like the stories you hear every week on this show, guess what? I have hundreds more from my nearly 30 years in the leadership trenches. And I don't just talk about building irresistible culture, I do it. You can bring me into Keynote, moderate your panels, or work directly with your leaders to drive material change. So let's roll up our sleeves, go out to heartbeatforhire.com, let's connect, and let's make some magic happen. Go lead with heart. Okay. So managing your own daughter has got to be challenging. And she's a phenomenal woman and a phenomenal human being, but how did you balance being a dad and being a manager and looking out for her and making sure she's with the right people? Like how do you do that delicate dance? Because that has to be full of challenges.
Yeah, it is full of challenges. And I tell everyone that's a very difficult, tough thing to do. Uh, Fortunately, I had been exposed in corporate America to having making tough decisions and
Yeah.
also the what a team really means. And when you have a group of men or women, and now they're still young, it's still a group of people, and you as the leader, you have to make tough decisions.
Okay.
I had a fiduciary duty to make sure all the ladies had success. But at that point, I'm not looking at one individual. I'm
No.
not looking at Beyonce as one. I'm looking at a group that's called Destiny's Child. And my decision making was what was best for the group. Sometimes it wasn't best for Beyonce.
Yeah.
And that's very, very tough to
That
do unless
I love that you talked about that because that is true leadership, right? When you are managing a team and you're trying to give them the space to do the job they were hired for, people are going to have different levels of ability. And choices that you make will impact the team, sometimes unfavorably. But how you lead through that and how you step up really matters. So I love that you said that. That is such a critical leadership tenet that we talk a lot about on this show. So thank you for doing that. I have to imagine all of that leadership experience really prepared you for having to be quite decisive through managing the band for a while.
Yeah, I always give Xerox Corporation the credit. Very thankful and grateful to have learned most of my experience for corporate. Um, as an entrepreneur, I
Mm.
learned that from Xerox and all the training. They gave us a lot of training, like IBM did.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm always about knowledge is power, and getting
Mm.
information is so critically important. But again, it was tough. It was tough. I mean, in retrospect, sometimes I miss the father-daughter time
Sure.
because I was in business mode.
Yeah.
But I look back and I say, would I do that again? Yeah, I would.
Yeah.
I would.
Yeah.
I think both Beyonce and Solange is like, Dad, I'm glad you did.
Yeah. Well, you had to
uh,
make a lot of really tough decisions. And one of the things I know you're known for is strategy. So you had to really think about long term what this was going to be. So, what were some of the key moves that you made to really make this last and make Destiny's Child ultimately what it became?
Yeah. Well, a lot of it again came from going back to school, going to as many conferences as I could
Mm.
to see those that were successful and understanding the business. So I really was like a sponge. I wanted to understand the music industry. And
Yeah.
what I understood, they were in the business of the music business. I was in the branding business.
Mm.
Two totally different approaches
Yeah.
with one goal, which was music, but I was more understanding quite on, hey, the marketing budget for Destiny's Child is $1 million. But if I can go and partner with L'Oreal,
Yes.
get the song in a commercial, and then eventually get the artist in a commercial, now I have a $25 million budget.
Yes.
And now I'm talking to 200 million people.
I love it.
So I learned that early on, and because of my sales expertise, I mainly always dealt with presidents
I love that. Oh, okay.
because
So let's pause because we have so
I
much
knew that
more
was
to
going to get.
cover. And I want to leave plenty of meat on the bone for part two. So first, let me just say I'm having such a good time. I hope you are too. And guys,
I am.
stay tuned. Next week, you will hear the second part of this incredible dialogue with Mr. Mathew Knowles. So hang tight, lead with heart, and we will be back next week with more.
I hope to see you next week.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks for listening. Today's audience question is, how do I know if my culture is quietly toxic? Well, first of all, culture doesn't have to be quietly toxic to be toxic. But some simple signals that you should be aware of is what is going on team calls. Is the team quiet? Are they asking questions? Or did they once ask questions and they were pretty involved and engaged and now they're not? Are you getting a lot of one-word answers? Yes, no, not a lot of elaboration. Are people not raising their hand to contribute or do more? Those are all good indications that something is wrong and perhaps you've broken their trust. Now, if you're in the midst of the bad culture yourself, you already know. But if you are a leader and you're trying to get underneath what's going on, one of the things I invite you to do is to ask your leaders, to ask the question, how can I be the best leader for you? It is a humbling question and it is really hard to ask. I've done it. But when you do, people will tell you what they need. And you, as their leader, have a responsibility to honor that and help lift them up and help them get to where they want to go. When you become a manager, you are no longer able to only take care of yourself and your career. You have people in your charge. It's really vital that you take care of them. I hope that helps. Have a great day. Thanks for listening to this episode of Heartbeat for Hire. I hope you enjoyed what you heard. If you did, please subscribe to my YouTube channel or consider leaving a 5-star review and a great rating at Spotify or Apple. Thank you so much for your support. Have a great day.